Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into how people actually make decisions, when it comes to games, like strategic games. We're not just talking about those simple economic models. We've got research papers, experimental results, even chess. Yeah, chess. Ready to get strategic.
Absolutely. And you know what's really fascinating? Human behavior, it often just goes completely against what those purely rational economic models predict. We're going to uncover some really surprising things, things that influence our choices when the stakes are high and when other people's actions, they impact our own.
All right, let's dive right in. First up, we've got this concept called backward induction. And it sounds pretty logical, right? You just start at the outcome you want and you work backward to figure out like the best way to get there, the best strategy.
Exactly. Think of it like planning a road trip. You know where you want to end up, right?
Oh,
So you work backward, you figure out the best route, maybe where you need to stop along the way, things like that. So in a strategic game, you would use backward induction to try to anticipate your opponent's moves. And
right.
from there, you can choose the path that gets you to the outcome you want, the most favorable one.
So, okay, if we're playing a game, right, and we're both trying to, you know, to get the biggest share of a pot of money, I should just grab it,
Yeah.
right, as soon as I have the chance.
Yeah.
Because I can't be sure that my opponent won't do the same thing when it's their turn.
Right. That's the basic idea. In a really simple game like that, backward induction would say, yeah, be ruthless, maximize your own gains. But, and here's where it gets interesting. There's this game, it's called the Centipede game.
Ooh, centipede game.
Mhm.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. How does this centipede game challenge that idea of, just being completely rational?
So imagine a game where you and we take turns and we have to decide whether to take a pot of money. But the pot, it keeps growing each time we pass. Now, if one of us takes the money, game's over, right? So backward induction would say that the first player, they should just take the pot right away, shouldn't they?
Yeah, that seems like the most logical move. You're guaranteeing you get something rather than risking getting nothing, right? If the other
Yeah,
person takes it on their turn.
exactly. But here's the really fascinating part. Studies, they show that people don't actually play that way. Instead, they cooperate a lot of the time. They pass the pot back and forth. And you know what? That leads to much higher payoffs for both players than backward induction would predict.
Wait, hold on. So people they're choosing to potentially get a smaller reward just to keep the game going. What's the logic behind that?
That is the million-dollar question. One possibility is that, well, maybe the reasoning behind backward induction, it's more complex than it seems at first, right? And maybe people, they just have trouble really grasping it, when they're in an actual game situation. But there's another possibility, a really interesting one, and it actually challenges those traditional economic models at their core.
Okay, I am all ears.
Yeah.
Lay it on me. What's this alternative explanation?
What if, and this is a big what if people aren't as purely self-interested as we often assume? What if they're considering other things, things we call other regarding concerns?
Okay. Other regarding concerns. Break that down for me. What does that even mean?
It means thinking about things like fairness, reciprocity, or even, like a desire to build trust with the other player. These are factors that traditional economic models, they don't really consider those, but
Yeah.
they seem to be really important in how people actually behave.
So even in a game that seems pretty cutthroat, people might still be thinking about the impact on the other player and how like their actions will shape the overall outcome, not just about, their own individual wins.
Exactly. It suggests that the way we make decisions, it's much more nuanced, it's much more complex than just calculating what's the biggest benefit I can get right now. Now, in these centipede game studies, they usually used university students or people like that. But what happens when you get people who are known for their strategic thinking? I'm talking about masters of strategy.
You mean like chess masters?
Exactly. There's this really fascinating study. They used chess masters as the players in a centipede game, and their behavior, it was much closer to what backward induction would predict. They stopped the game earlier. Basically, they took the pot sooner than the players who weren't experts.
So experience and being an expert in strategic thinking, it does seem to influence how people play this game. So are chess masters just like better at calculating the best moves?
That's one way to look at it. But here's another really interesting detail. The other chess players, the ones playing against the masters, they knew they were up against a master, right? And they also stopped the game earlier as if they were they were anticipating that the master would take a more strategic, a more backward induction kind of approach.
Wait, so their behavior changed just because they knew they were playing against a master? That's wild. Does that mean that our decisions can be influenced by how we see our opponent, by what we think they're capable of?
It seems that way. It suggests that we're constantly, we're evaluating the game, yeah, but we're also evaluating the person we're playing against. What are their strategies? How might what we do influence what they do? And that just adds this whole other layer of complexity to the whole decision-making process.
This centipede game is it's really revealing some fascinating stuff. But I know there are lots of other games out there that can help us understand, how we make decisions. What's next on our deep dive agenda?
Let's take a look at the ultimatum game. This one's a classic for exploring, our sense of fairness and how that plays out in these strategic interactions.
Okay, I'm ready to see how fairness plays into all of this. Bring on the ultimatum game.
Welcome back to our exploration of decision making. We've seen how backward induction can be a really powerful tool, but it doesn't always line up with how people actually behave. Especially when those other regarding concerns come into play.
Right, like in that centipede game where they're often choosing to cooperate instead of just, going for the immediate gain. It's like fairness and trust, they're bigger factors than we might think. So tell me about this ultimatum game. How does it work?
It's actually pretty simple. There are two players. One player, we call them the proposer. They get a sum of money, let's say like $10, and they have to propose how to split that money with the other player, who we call the responder.
Okay, so far so good. Sounds like dividing up a prize or figuring out how to share some unexpected money. What happens next?
The responder, they can either accept the offer, in which case both players get the agreed upon amounts, or they can reject it.
And if they reject it?
Then neither player gets anything. So there's this big incentive for the responder to just accept any offer, even if it's, a really small amount.
That's interesting. It seems like the proposer, they have all the power here. Do they usually offer a tiny amount and just, hope that the responder will take it just to get something?
You'd think so, right? But that's not really what happens. Studies show that proposers, they tend to offer around 40%, and rejections, they're less frequent for higher offers, obviously.
So even though they could try to get away with offering a tiny little piece of the pie, most people, they offer a pretty fair split. That kind of goes against that whole, purely self-interested idea, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests that people don't want to be seen as unfair, like they're averse to it. Even if it's just a one-time interaction with a stranger, they seem to just get it, that offering a really low amount, it might lead to getting rejected, and they'd rather, get a slightly smaller gain than risk not getting anything at all.
That makes sense. I can see how that instinct for fairness, it would evolve over time. Like if you have a reputation for being greedy, people, they might not want to cooperate with you later on down the line. But is this sense of fairness, is it universal? Do people in different cultures, do they play the ultimatum game the same way?
That's a great question. And it turns out that cultural norms, they have a huge impact on how the ultimatum game plays out. There was this study, they compared the behavior of UCLA students to members of the Machigenga tribe in the Amazon.
Okay, yeah, those are two very different cultures. What did they find?
The Machigenga tribe members, they offered way less than the UCLA students, and they were less likely to reject low offers.
So what explains that difference? Were the Machigenga just less concerned about fairness?
Not necessarily. It might be that their economic system, their social structure, they don't emphasize individual gain the same way, that Western cultures do. They have more of a collectivist approach where sharing and cooperation they're really highly valued. So it might seem like a really unfair offer in a Western context. It could be perfectly acceptable in their culture.
That's fascinating. It shows how our ideas about fairness, they're shaped by, our experiences, our values, what we think is fair. It's not always objective truth. It's influenced by the norms of the society that we live in.
Exactly. And that has implications for how we, interact with people from different cultures. We can't just assume that that they share our understanding of what's fair, what's reasonable.
Okay, so we've seen how the ultimatum game, it reveals this interplay between self-interest and this desire for fairness. Are there other games that explore these concepts even further?
Yeah, there's the dictator game. It's similar to the ultimatum game, but it takes away the possibility of rejection. The proposer, we call him the dictator in this game, they just decide how much to give the other player, and that's it. There's no back and forth. There's no risk of losing everything.
So you'd think that people would be super stingy in this game, right? If there's no chance of getting rejected, why not just keep all the money for yourself?
You would think so, but surprisingly, even in this scenario where there are absolutely no social consequences for being greedy people,
Hmm.
they still tend to give something to the other player.
Wow, really? So how much do they usually give?
On average, dictators give away about 20 to 30% of the money. It's less than in the ultimatum game, but it's still pretty significant considering they have no obligation to share at all.
So even when there's no risk of like punishment or social disapproval,
Yeah.
people they still show some level of altruism. But is this giving behavior, is it always consistent? Are there things that influence how much people give in the dictator game?
Absolutely. Researchers have found that things like anonymity, the perceived characteristics of the recipient, even the size of the stakes, all of that can influence giving behavior.
Hmm.
For example, people tend to give more when they know the recipient, like their identity, or when they believe that the recipient is deserving.
It's like we're trying to justify our actions, even to ourselves.
Hmm.
If we can come up with a reason why the other person deserves our generosity, then
Yeah.
we're more likely to give up some of our money. That's really interesting.
It is, and it shows that even in a simple game like this, there's a lot more going on than just a simple calculation of costs and benefits. Our decisions, they're shaped by this complex web of social and psychological factors.
Yeah, it seems like there's always another layer to uncover when it comes to human behavior. Okay, so we've talked about the Centipede game, the Ultimatum game, and the Dictator game. What other games are on our list today?
Let's move on to the trust game, which it highlights the role of trust and trustworthiness in decision making. This one involves taking a leap of faith, knowing that there's a chance you might get burned.
Ooh, a leap of faith. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more about how it works.
So in the trust game, one player, the sender, they're given a sum of money. They can choose to send any amount of it or none at all to another player, the receiver. And the money they send, it gets tripled before it reaches the receiver.
Okay, so the receiver gets a nice bonus if the sender trusts them enough to send some money their way. What happens next?
The receiver then decides how much of that tripled money to send back to the sender.
Ah, so it's a test of reciprocity.
Hmm.
The sender takes a risk, and the receiver gets to decide whether to honor that trust, by sending a fair share back.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is that people generally do exhibit trust and trustworthiness in this game. The average amount sent is about half of the sender's initial endowment, and the average amount returned is around 37% of the tripled sum.
So they're willing to take a chance, and they often, they reciprocate when someone shows trust in them. But is this true across the board? Are there factors that influence how much trust people are willing to put in others?
That's a great question. Research shows that our willingness to trust others, it can be influenced by things like our personality, our past experiences, and even our cultural background.
So someone who's been betrayed in the past, they might be less likely to trust a stranger in the trust game, while someone who comes from a culture that really values, community and cooperation, they might be more trusting.
Precisely. And it goes both ways. Our perceived trustworthiness, it can also be influenced by things like our reputation, even our physical appearance.
It's like we're constantly making judgments about each other based on all these cues, some of them conscious, some of them, unconscious. And those judgments, they shape our interactions, even in simple games like this.
You got it. And these findings, they have implications for the real world. Think about online transactions, collaborative projects, or any situation where trust is essential. Understanding those factors that influence trust and trustworthiness that can help us build stronger relationships and navigate, those complex social interactions that we all have to deal with.
This trust game is it's really making me think about how much we rely on trust in our everyday lives. It's fascinating. Okay, what's next on our game theory adventure?
Let's shift gears a bit and look at the public goods game, which it has some real world implications for how we manage shared resources and how we cooperate as a group.
I'm ready to get into the group dynamics. Tell me about this public goods game.
Imagine you and a group of people. You're all given some money. You can choose to keep it all for yourself or contribute some or all of it to a common pool. The money in the common pool, it's multiplied and then distributed equally to everyone, regardless of whether they contributed or not.
So there's an incentive to contribute because your money it'll grow and you'll get a share of everyone else's contributions. But there's also this temptation to free ride, to keep your own money and benefit from everyone else's contributions without actually contributing yourself.
Exactly. And that's the dilemma, at the heart of the public goods game. If everyone contributes, the group as a whole, they benefit the most. But from an individual perspective, it's always tempting to free ride and just, maximize your own personal gains.
Yeah, I can see how this relates to real world issues like paying taxes, donating to charity, or even just doing your fair share in a group project at work or school.
Absolutely. And studies show that that cooperation often declines over time in public goods games.
So people start out, enthusiastically contributing, but then they realize that other people are free riding and they start doing the same thing.
That's often what happens. It's like the classic prisoner's dilemma, but it's playing out on a larger scale.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you see that other people aren't cooperating, you feel like a sucker for continuing to contribute. But this is kind of depressing. Is there any way to encourage people to cooperate and avoid that downward spiral?
There are a few strategies that researchers have found to be effective. One is to increase what we call the marginal per capita return, which is it's basically the personal benefit that you get for each contribution.
So if they see a more direct and immediate benefit from contributing, then they're more likely to do it.
Exactly. Another strategy is to use partner matching. That's where you play with the same group of people over and over again, and that fosters a sense of accountability, and it can help build trust and reciprocity within the group.
It's like building a sense of community where they're more invested in the well-being of the group as a whole. Those are some interesting ideas.
Right. And these findings, they have implications for how we design policies, how we manage resources, and how we encourage cooperation in all sorts of real world situations.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground with the public goods game. What's next on our game theory agenda?
Let's take a look at a game that I find particularly intriguing because it highlights a unique social dilemma. It's called the volunteer's dilemma.
A volunteer's dilemma. I haven't heard of that one before. What makes it so unique?
Okay, so the volunteer's dilemma. Imagine this: there's something that needs to be done, right? And if it gets done, the whole group benefits. But it requires one person to kind of step up and make a sacrifice. The catch is that if anyone volunteers, everyone benefits, even the people who didn't do anything.
I see the dilemma. It's
Yeah.
like, that saying, many hands make light work, but in this case, everyone's hoping that someone else will be the hand.
Exactly. It's really about those moments where, we have to decide, do I take action, even if it costs me something, knowing that if someone else steps up, we'll still benefit.
This feels very, very real world.
Yeah.
It's like when someone needs help on a crowded street, everyone sees it, right?
Right.
But everyone's kind of hoping that someone else will be the one to actually do something. Or like at work, nobody wants to volunteer for that extra project, but everyone's relieved when someone finally does.
Yeah, perfect examples. The volunteer's dilemma, it captures that tension between, our self-interest, we want to avoid the cost of volunteering, but then there's the potential benefit to the group, which, we get to enjoy too. It really highlights that bystander effect.
So what have researchers found? Do people actually step up and volunteer, or do they usually just hope that someone else will?
Well, like with most of these games, it depends on a lot of things. The size of the group, how costly it is to volunteer, even individual personality traits. But the interesting thing is that people do volunteer even when there's a big incentive to just free ride.
So there's hope for humanity.
Yeah.
We're not all just selfish calculators.
Yeah.
What about that last game on our list, the guessing game? What does that one tell us?
The guessing game, it gives us this really interesting look at how people reason strategically. Okay, so here's the premise. You have to guess a number, and whoever guesses closest to 2/3 of the average of all the guesses, they win.
Okay, sounds simple enough, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, there definitely is. If everyone was perfectly rational
Right.
and they all followed backward induction, to its logical conclusion, they would all guess zero.
Zero. How does it work?
Think about it. If everyone's trying to guess two-thirds of the average, and the average is probably going to be somewhere between 0 and 100, the logical thing to do is just keep lowering your guess, keep lowering it until you get to 0. It's like this process of elimination.
Ah, I see. You're anticipating what other rational players will do, and then you adjust your strategy to match that.
Hmm?
But you said that people usually don't guess zero, right?
Right. What we usually see is people's guesses. They tend to cluster around certain levels, like steps of elimination. They're definitely thinking strategically, but they're not always taking it all the way down to 0.
So they're reasoning strategically, but maybe not to the full extent that backward induction would predict. What explains that? Are people just not good at math?
That's probably not it. It's more about the limits of, our cognitive abilities and the assumptions that we make about other players. The level model, it's a really fascinating way to explain this behavior.
Okay, tell me more about this level model. How does it fit into the guessing game?
So imagine that each player, they think they're the most sophisticated thinker in the game, right? They think they can reason through multiple steps of elimination, and they assign themselves a level 1, level 2, and so on. And the higher levels, they mean more strategic depth.
So a level 1 player, they might only think one step ahead, while a level 3 player, they might anticipate the reasoning of a level 2 player, and so on.
Exactly. But the thing is, players, they often overestimate their own level of sophistication. They think they're thinking more strategically than their opponents. And this leads to a really interesting pattern in the guesses.
So a level 1 player, they might guess 50, right?
Mhm.
Thinking that's a pretty reasonable average.
Mhm.
Then a level 2 player, they anticipate that, and they guess, two-thirds of 50, and so on. It's like a cognitive arms race.
Exactly. And it helps explain why we see those clusters of guesses, around certain numbers. It's reflecting those different levels of strategic reasoning that are happening in the game.
That's so cool. We've covered a lot of ground today, from backward induction and the centipede game to the surprising power of intuition and just how complex human behavior really is.
Absolutely. We've seen that fairness, trust, reciprocity, even our intuitive judgments, they all play a huge role in how we make decisions.
And even when we're trying to be strategic, we're limited by how our brains work and the assumptions we make about other people. It's this fascinating dance between logic, social considerations, and surprisingly, intuition.
Speaking of intuition, remember how we talked about how quickly someone makes a decision and how that can be a clue to whether the choice is more, cognitive or instinctive.
Yeah, I'm ready to circle back to that whole intuition thing. It's still kind of mind-blowing to me that our gut feelings could have such a powerful influence on the choices that we make.
Right. It seems counterintuitive that in these games, these clear rules and strategies, something as seemingly irrational as intuition would play such a big role. But that's exactly what the research is pointing to.
So tell me more about those studies on decision speed. What did they find?
Remember the ultimatum game where the proposer has to decide how to split the money? Researchers found that when proposers offered a perfectly equal split, they made that decision much faster than when they offered a less equitable split.
So offering an equal split was more intuitive, like almost an automatic response,
Hmm.
while offering less required more deliberate thought and calculation.
That's one way to interpret it. It suggests that fairness, or at least what people see as fair in a particular situation, it might be a more intuitive impulse than we think.
That makes sense. It's like our gut instinct is to be fair, but then we start overthinking it, worrying about getting the most for ourselves, and we end up offering less. Is that kind of what's going on?
It's a compelling idea, and it really challenges that traditional economic view that we're, primarily driven by self-interest. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When researchers looked at the responders, the ones who had to decide whether to accept or reject the offer, there was no difference in how fast they made their decision, between those who accepted and those who rejected, even when the offers were unfair.
Hold on, that doesn't seem right. You're saying that rejecting an unfair offer which seems like a really emotional, almost angry response. It's not happening any faster than accepting a fair offer.
Exactly. It challenges that assumption that rejecting unfair offers is purely driven by this, quick emotional reaction. It suggests that there might be more cognitive processing going on, even in the seemingly heat of the moment decisions.
Wow. Okay. So what's the takeaway here? What does this all tell us about the role of intuition in decision making?
It suggests that intuition might be a much more complex and nuanced process than we realize. It's not just about those quick gut reactions. It can also involve unconscious processing of information, social norms, even past experiences.
So our intuition, it might actually be drawing on a much deeper well of knowledge than we're consciously aware of.
Exactly. It's not just random hunches. It's a form of intelligence that can be surprisingly accurate and efficient, especially in those situations where we have to, make quick decisions.
That's fascinating. But I have to ask if our intuition is sometimes leading us to make these fair and cooperative choices, then why do we see so much, selfish and uncooperative behavior in the world?
That's a great question, and it brings us to another important piece of this puzzle, the impact of time pressure on decision making.
So maybe when we're under pressure, we're more likely to abandon those intuitive, maybe more pro-social responses and just, go back to those calculated, self-interested strategies like every man for himself.
That's a reasonable assumption, and there's actually some research to back that up. One study looked at the public goods game, remember, where everyone can contribute to the common pool. They found that when people were forced to make decisions quickly, they actually contributed more to the public good.
Wait, really? That seems completely backwards. Shouldn't time pressure make people, more selfish, more focused on grabbing what they can before it's gone?
It is counterintuitive, isn't it? But the researchers, they suggested that this finding, it supports the idea that our more intuitive response might actually be to cooperate. And it's only when we have, more time to think about it, to deliberate, that we start, thinking about how to maximize our own gains, even if it's at the expense of others.
So our first impulse, our gut feeling, it might be to do the right thing, the more cooperative thing, but then our calculating minds, they take over and we talk ourselves out of it.
That's a simplified way of putting it, but yeah, it captures the general idea.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
But if time pressure sometimes, reveals our more cooperative side, is there evidence that having more time to think actually leads to less cooperative behavior?
There is. Another study, they looked at the dictator game, the one where one person gets to decide how to split the money, right? And they found that when people had a whole day to think about their decision, they were actually less generous than those who made the decision right away.
Wow, really? So giving them more time to think about their choices, it actually made them singier. That's kind of a bummer.
It is a bit disheartening, but it does lend more support to the idea that our more intuitive responses, they might be more pro-social than our more thought out ones.
So what's the takeaway here? Are we doomed to just be, slaves to our selfish calculations, or can we somehow harness the power of our more cooperative intuitions?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something that researchers, philosophers, even policymakers are all grappling with. There's no easy answer, but what's exciting is that we're starting to uncover some of those hidden mechanisms that drive our decision making.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've gone from backward induction and the centipede game to the surprising power of intuition and just how complex human behavior really is.
And we've seen that even in the seemingly structured world of games. Our decisions are influenced by all these factors: logic, social norms, emotions, and even our gut feelings.
It's like we're constantly trying to balance our self-interest with our desire to be fair, to cooperate, to be trustworthy, and the amount of time that we have to make a decision, the cost and benefits, the social context, it all plays a role in the choices that we make. It's really fascinating stuff.
It really is. And for those listening who want to explore this further, I encourage you to look into these games, look into the research behind them. There's so much more to discover.
I know I'll be thinking about these games next time I'm faced with a tough decision. Maybe I'll even try to apply some of these concepts to my own life. See if I can nudge myself towards a more a more cooperative, a more intuitive approach. Who knows? Maybe we can all learn to be a bit more strategic, a bit more fair, and a bit more in tune with our gut feelings.
That's a great goal. And who knows, maybe by understanding these seemingly simple games, we can unlock some really profound insights into human nature and build a more cooperative and just world.
That's deep dive worth taking. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic to explore. Until then, keep those minds curious and those intuitions sharp.